Yo, welcome back to another episode of the Money Matters podcast. I am your host, Jack. What a fun day in financial markets. We got volatility, we got tariffs, we got buyers, we got sellers, we got green, we got red. And I want to make the case on this episode why all of this is very exciting and good for Bitcoin. But first, let's timestamp this bad boy, shall we? I am dialing in on April 7th, which is a Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm currently on Wall Street in the Big Apple in New York City, working on something special I'll announce likely next week. As I'm talking into the camera in a hotel room by myself, the Bitcoin price is currently $79,400. So a bit of a dip below 80,000. That puts Bitcoin's market cap at just above 1.5 trillion at 1.58 trillion US dollars. The Bitcoin all-time high is 109,300. We are currently 27% down from all-time highs. Hello, chat. It's good to see everybody. For those unfamiliar with this podcast, I'll make it quick. I got no ads. I got no sponsors. It's just signal. My brain, your ears, once a week, every Monday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Pacific. Today, this week's episode, I got to cover the tariffs. We got to cover macroeconomics. I'm talking about the unwind of World War II economic order, the fact that the dollar as the world reserve currency is a proven problem now admitted by the White House. And yes, in the short term, things are volatile. In the medium to long term, I'm a huge Bitcoin bull. I think this is massive for Bitcoin. The tailwinds are really building, and I want to make that case on this episode today. I'd say I got 15 to 30 minutes max of a rant, and then at the tail end of this episode, I'll go through some Q&A questions as you guys ask them in the chat, and then I'm out of here. I got shit to do. Okay? Let's go. Now, I want to use this episode to make the case that this macro setup, what we're living through with Trump, this new administration, global trade, tariffs, is very good for Bitcoin, very good for neutral reserve assets, very good for a monetary policy that's distributed, that's fixed, and a money that's accessible to everyone. So, first, I just want to draw everyone's attention to Trump, and he's claiming he wants to fix the deficits. So for those that don't know, we've had Liberation Day in the United States of America, where Donald Trump has announced the tariffs that the United States will be imposing on other countries around the world, meaning that other countries, in order to get access to the U.S. economy, to export stuff into our country, they're going to have to pay a tax. Trump's big message in his first administration as president, 2016, campaigning and running to be president now, since he's been elected as the president and been running the White House, his message has been consistent. His message has been the same. What has Donald Trump's message been? His message has been, I'm here to fix our trade deficits. We cannot operate with such a big deficit in this country and rely on the rest of the world to make all of our stuff. This, do I have audio? Who's saying no audio? All right, I'm going to keep going. What Donald Trump is saying, by the way, this is not a political podcast, okay? This is not a left or a right or an up or a down. This is a Jack Mallers show. That's my show, and it's my opinion, okay? Miss me with the politics stuff. As traders, as market participants, as Bitcoiners, I'm not caring about politics right now. Don't give a crap. Kid show. Don't care, okay? So I'm going to go through my interpretation of U.S. politics. If it offends you, and it's probably something to do with you, not me, because I'm not advocating. I'm not saying who's right or wrong in the political lens. I'm saying what they're doing, what they're saying, how it matters and impacts Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin's going to be the thing that changes the world. It's the best vehicle for us to express a better future, and that's what I'm here to cover. Very quick disclaimer. Okay, what is Donald Trump's message? Donald Trump's message is look around you. Look at your phone. Look at your clothes. Look at your laptop. Look at the things that you're washing yourself with in the shower. None of it is made in America, okay? When we have took on the responsibility of being the world reserve currency, the US dollar, our job is to export the dollar and import goods and services. That is what we call operating in a deficit, okay? We are importing debt and real stuff like oil, energy, food, metals, and we're exporting currency. We're distributing out the US dollar. And Donald Trump's message, whether you like it or not, his message has been consistent. And he's saying, I have to stop these deficits. We're operating in a trade deficit. None of the stuff that we use in our lives is made here in America. Why is that a bad thing? One, there's not enough jobs here in America, and the middle to lower class has been getting crushed here. We're becoming hyper financialized. Two, this is a national security threat, because if Russia or China decide not to like us very much, then none of the stuff we use in our lives, they're going to make for us anymore. What if they decide they don't want to make our weapons? They don't want to make our phones. They don't want to give us energy and oil. Then what? Then what? And so his message is we have to focus on ourselves. We have to focus on producing stuff here, and we have to focus on our deficits. So with these tariffs, he's making a very bold claim to the rest of the world and saying, you know, this world monetary economic order that we set up post-World War II, where the U.S. was strong and we were going to export the strength of our country and our economy through our world reserve currency, and we'll give you all dollars and you'll give us real stuff. Well, I'm ending that. We're going to impose tariffs and we're going to fix our deficit and your surplus. Because guys, if we're operating in a deficit, other countries are operating in a surplus. They're exporting stuff to us, oil, gas, food, energy, raw materials, and they're getting profit. They're getting dollars, okay? So that's step one, is Trump saying, I'm fixing the deficits. Now, the really important thing to understand is how world trade works today when we're operating in a deficit and other countries are operating in a surplus. When a country gives the United States in trade energy, oil, food, metals, something, stuff, they're getting a bunch of dollars in return, okay? So let's say I'm a country and I'm manufacturing a bunch of stuff for the US. We have trade. I send them all the stuff and I get a bunch of dollars in return. Countries do not sell those dollars for their local currency and invest locally. Why? Because it's very important that they keep their currencies weak. That would strengthen their local currencies. If you want a competitive export market, you have to have a weak local currency because you want cheap labor. You want cheap exports, okay? So what do these countries do with all of their profit? This is the big like aha moment that we all have to recognize. What they do with their profit is they buy US debt like treasuries and US stocks, okay? So the reason there's been this US exceptionalism where the US stock market is trading so much higher than every other stock market is because all of the global trade surplus, all the global trade profit is being invested into US stocks, okay? Countries take their profit they're making in global trade. They do not invest it in their local economy because it will strengthen their local currency and weaken their ability to export their products and materials. So they take their profit and they buy treasuries and they buy US stocks. And so now, if the US new economic policy is hey, foreigners, take your stuff and get the hell out of here. Take your money and go home. By the way, I don't like the fact that you have a surplus, and I don't like the fact that we have a deficit. What is that going to do to the treasury and the stock market? That's a huge problem because all the people that we're willing. If I'm a foreign country and Donald Trump is saying, hey, take your money and go home, okay, fine. But my money is in your treasuries and in stocks like NVIDIA. So taking my money and going home is dumping all my stocks and dumping all my treasuries and taking my capital and going home. And so why are you seeing massive, massive, massive sell-offs, especially in the stock market, is because a lot of the buyers of U.S. stocks and U.S. exceptionalism is foreigners because of the surplus they are getting in global trade. And so if the United States is saying, we're no longer putting up with you operating in a surplus, we no longer want a deficit, then that is very bad for stocks. One of the reasons I personally believe Bitcoin will inevitably decouple from the stock market is because the stock market has been treated as this excess fiat liquidity monetized expression of currency debasement because it's where a lot of the global trade surplus has ended up. People don't want treasuries. They'd rather own Google stock. That's the truth. They would rather own forward earnings in Facebook and Amazon and Apple and in Google than long duration US debt instruments. Is all of that makes sense? So if Donald Trump is going to say, I want to realign the economic order globally, he's going to crash the stock market and there's going to be a lot of disturbance in the treasury market. Now, how is this all good for Bitcoin? Okay, when Jerome Powell came out in March meeting for the Fed and said, I'm slowing down QT and I'm going to soon enact QE, and when Secretary Bessent of the Treasury said, we're looking into the SLR, which would allow banks to buy unlimited amounts of treasuries, what are these guys saying? They're saying if foreigners aren't the buyers of U.S. treasuries and aren't giving our markets in America liquidity, we have to find it somewhere else. If China, if Russia, if these countries are not buying our debt and are not investing in our economy, who will? And when Trump is saying, Jerome Powell sucks, Jerome Powell sucks, Jerome Powell sucks, because Donald Trump needs Jerome Powell to enact quantitative easing to print money. The only way to solve the deficits is to print money. This is the massive aha moment that you have to realize is, listen, what Donald Trump wants to do is fix the deficits. He doesn't like that other countries are operating in a surplus and having jobs like manufacturing jobs, lower class jobs. They have a real middle class. None of these things the United States of America has. Secretary Bessent is getting out in the media and he's saying 90% of the stock market is owned by 10% of our population. We highly bias the upper class. You either own financial assets and you benefit from the currency debasement, or you don't and you get screwed. And Trump is saying my voting bloc, half my voting bloc has never owned a stock. They want manufacturing jobs. Half of them aren't college educated. Half this country doesn't go to university. And I need to reindustrialize this country. We have to produce stuff here. We have to defend against the fact that we're reliant on the outside world to actually live our lives. That's fine. All of that's fine. If you want to do that, whatever. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. That's not what this podcast is about. What this podcast is about is, okay, if you're going to tell other countries no more surplus, take your money and go home, their money is in NVIDIA. Their money is in our debt. They're going to dump treasuries. They're going to sell our stock market. Who's going to buy it? Who's going to replace the bidder that was China, that was the Middle East, that was Russia, that was Europe? Who's going to replace that? And if you listen, it's the Federal Reserve and it's the U.S. banking system. The amount of money that they're going to have to print in order to make up for the realignment of global trade. And when the White House comes out and starts self-admitting that the US dollar positions us unfairly to operate in a deficit and have global trade, if you want to be the world reserve currency, you have to operate in a deficit. Your job is to give the rest of the world your currency and import debt and real stuff. So if you don't like that setup, then you don't want to be the world reserve currency. It's just plain and simple. So when people say we're moving towards a neutral reserve asset, things like gold are valuable, things like Bitcoin are valuable. Why? It's obvious. Because no one wants to be the world reserve currency. No one wants to operate into deficit. No one wants to deindustrialize. No one wants to eliminate their middle class. No one wants to disadvantage the poor. Nobody wants to over-financialize. Nobody wants any of these things. That's what Donald Trump is saying. But what we're living through, listen, short-term pain, short-term volatility, we've been saying it over and over and over and over again on this podcast. If you're caught off sides today, you haven't been listening. I'm telling you, volatility in the short term, it could go up, it could go down. The point is it's not going to stay flat. It's going to bounce around. It's going to try and scare you out. It's going to try and shake you out. You got to stay solvent. You got to live your life. Make more than you're spending right now. Do not use leverage. Go outside, be productive, smile, hang out with your friends. Just breathe, relax for a second. We cannot affect so much change without volatility. Okay. But why is the stock market crashing? Why are you seeing such violent reaction from tariffs? Because tariffs take away the surplus other countries have. Other countries take their profit from us when they trade and they dump it into the stock market. By the way, this is another thing. U.S. exceptionalism, like every single country listed in the U.S. is better than everybody else. Every single technology built in the U.S. is better than everyone else. That idea is going to get challenged. I think that Bitcoin will decouple from the stock market because, guys, things like DeepSeek, the reason things like DeepSeek are so scary is because it causes investors to think, wait, is everything made in the U.S. actually that much better than the rest of the world? If so, why? Also, why am I paying 30, 40, 50 times earnings for NVIDIA? If Donald Trump is basically saying, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, take your money, go home. You're not allowed to invest in the U.S. stock market. We're not going to give you a surplus in global trade and excess U.S. dollars to punt on stocks. Then why am I an investor? Why am I going to pay 40 times earnings for NVIDIA if I'm not basically buying the guarantee that everyone who's operating in a global trade surplus is going to be investing in the stocks here, right? It's like, oh, U.S. exceptionalism has just been funded by foreigners operating in a surplus. Does that make sense? So all of a sudden, if no one's going to be operating in a surplus and there's not a bunch of excess capital that's seeking a dollar-denominated home, they do not want to invest in their local economy with local currency because it's going to strengthen the currency. So if I'm China, let me just give an example. I'm China, I'm trading with the US. I give the US a bunch of shit. iPhones and laptops and cases or whatever. Masks. I give US a bunch of stuff in trade and I get a bunch of dollars. If I exchange those dollars for local currency, I'm strengthening the currency, which weakens my export economy. I have to have a weak Chinese currency if I want to be the industrial power of the world. So what do I do with all these dollars? What foreign countries do with all the dollars is they buy our treasuries, they buy our stock market. They buy US stocks, they buy US debt. They need dollar-denominated investments with these dollars. And so if the new policy is take your money, go home, get out of here, and by the way, when we trade, you're not going to get a surplus of dollars to invest. Well, what's that going to do to stocks? Go down. These countries are going to have to sell their stocks, sell their US debt. They're not going to have a surplus to invest. So all of a sudden, I do not expect US stocks to be trading at 30, 40, 50 times earnings. Why would they? For those of you that believed it's because NVIDIA is that impressive of a company, they're not. It's because there's been that much fiat liquidity sloshing around. So I expect stocks to be repriced. If stocks don't have an infinite bid from foreign nation states, what multiple on earnings should you pay? It's a question for the free market, but not 50. I'll tell you that much. And this is why Bitcoin will decouple, because Bitcoin isn't priced on earnings. And if countries are looking for something to own, you're going to want scarce reserve assets. Long gold, long Bitcoin. Easy. So people don't understand what we're living through. And I'm looking on the internet and everyone's freaking out. And my message to my audience and to the Bitcoiners is just relax. You got to breathe. Calm down. Understand what you own. Understand what we're living through right now. Let the stock market puke and figure itself out. And by the way, is it over? No. What are we living through right now? We're trying. Yeah, I'm literally on Wall Street having meetings with Wall Street people. This city is full of a bunch of over-levered, pompous hedge fund assholes. These guys, I mean, the stock market's down like 4%. These guys are begging and pleading and screaming for a bailout. Give me a break. Everyone wants a relief rally. We're now at the phase where everyone's like, oh, you hear that? Oh my God, Trump said that he's open to negotiations. Trump said he might walk back what he said. And no one's actually pricing in the fact that Trump means business. Whether you like it or not, Trump wants to help the poor American. Trump wants to create factory jobs. Trump wants to produce stuff here. Trump wants to fix the deficit problem. That's until I see otherwise, Trump is about business. Trump is keeping his promises. Whether you like it or not, this is not a political podcast. I'm just calling it how I see it. And you've got a bunch of over-levered people here in New York that are just losing their mind. Listen, it is what it is. And this is so bullish for Bitcoin. They're going to have to print so much money. Bitcoin is really priced with how much fiat currency is sloshing around in the world. And in order for all of this to play out and work, we have to debase our currency. We have to devalue our debt, and we have to create more fiat. It's going to send Bitcoin nuclear. And this thing will not trade like a beta NASDAQ stock. It won't. Now, I'm not saying it's decoupling today. I'm not saying it's going to decouple tomorrow. All the people on Twitter like taking 15-minute candles and claiming Bitcoin's decoupling, it's just not how it's going to work. Right now, people are begging and pleading for a relief rally. They're like, oh my God, did you hear Trump just got on the phone to negotiate? Like, please, 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 President Trump, bail us out, reverse all your policies. And then I don't think we felt enough pain. We haven't felt enough pain. These people need to learn. And Trump's been very open about it. He's like, I'm not looking at the stock market. Sometimes you need to take your medicine. That's what he said. If you are an over-levered, pompous hedge fund, bro, sometimes you need to take your medicine. So, anyways, my advice is this. Stay humble, stack sats, make more than you earn, relax, breathe, stay patient. The world is moving towards where we belong, a neutral, fair, distributed world reserve asset. Okay? Let these red candles wash over you. Go do something valuable for the world. Find income, find earnings, stack sats. Go acquire as much as you possibly can. On the other side of this, medium, long term, I'm talking, guys, by the end of this year, I expect a Bitcoin to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I do, genuinely, in my heart, the left side of my chest, because they have to print so much money. If China, if Russia, if the Middle East, if these countries aren't buying our debt, someone else has to. That's the Federal Reserve. They're print. Powell came out at the FOMC meeting and said exactly that. He said, I'm slowing down QT. QE might be on the horizon because I got a job to do, and that is fund the U.S. government because Trump said China ain't funding it anymore. All right. That's my rant. That's what I wanted to communicate. Hopefully it was clear. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Here's how questions work. And for those listening on the podcast airwaves, I'm seeing our numbers go up. A lot of you guys listen to us on the podcast airwaves. Let me say the way Q&A works is I have a live audience. I've got a bunch of people right now. Shout out the live audience. Shout out the chat. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter, live audience. They ask questions in real time. I got a team lurking in the chat that collects all the questions as I'm ranting and screaming at this screen by myself in my hotel room. And I try and answer them in real time. So if you ever want to ask me a question, try and join us live every single Monday. And once I've yelled at myself for about 20 minutes or so, I try and rotate to questions, see what I didn't explain perfectly. And then we move on and I give you guys the rest of your afternoon. Okay, on to questions. Macro. If President Trump manages to reduce the balance of payments towards zero, then the world won't have dollars. So what will become the world reserve currency? How can foreign nations pay their dollar debt? So I don't think Trump wants to balance towards zero. Let's be clear about something, guys. Their target, Donald Trump, Scott Bessen's target, is not a surplus. They don't want to operate in a surplus. They actually want to operate in a deficit of 3%. So we know they're still printing money. We know we're still going to be creating more fiat units, just to be clear. But what's the future world reserve currency? It's a good question. Listen, can the dollar be the world reserve currency, but Bitcoin and gold be an asset, a neutral asset that central banks and governments and institutions use to settle trade? Yeah, 100%. That's actually my expectation. I mean, listen, it's actually not that complicated. Bitcoin has to be worth 21 million divided by however many currency units are sloshing around. If you think there's going to be more fiat in the world in the future, then you want to own the scarcest thing possible you can get your hands on. And so I think, and we've seen that. Bitcoin's gone from 0 to 1.5 trillion. It's been pretty obvious to me. So I think it'll continue. It'll go from 1.5 trillion to 150 trillion. So I think the world reserve asset, or how we settle global trade, or think of it this way, like, what are institutions and governments and central banks going to comprise their balance sheets of? You can make all this fugazi, world reserve currency. What do we price our hot dogs in? It doesn't actually matter that much right now. What matters is, where are you storing your cash balance? What is your balance sheet comprised of? Where you have value to store? What are you storing it in? I think that'll be increasingly more Bitcoin, less bonds, less treasuries, less stocks, more Bitcoin, more gold, right? Does that make sense? Now, whether it's the world reserve currency or not, that's not today's problem. That's not today's problem. People have too many egos to even entertain that conversation right now. The conversation that has to be held right now is, we're changing rapidly where our value is stored, how global trade is architected, who's in a surplus, who's in a deficit. So what do you need? You want a money that's scarce in supply. You want a money that's easy to hold. I can hold it digitally for free. A money that's easy to transport. I can move it digitally, basically for free. A money that's infinitely divisible. So a money that can measure a grain of sand economically, or a professional sports team. I mean, Bitcoin ticks every box, every box. Do you think China is selling their 10-year? We are back at about 4.2%. Yeah, I think foreigners are selling something, because that's the new economic policy. The economic policy is, take your money, go home. It's like, okay, well, my money is in your stocks and your debt. So if I need to sell stuff right now because you're claiming you're getting rid of my surplus, and I need to make sure I can finance and fund dollar-denominated payments in the future, okay, I'm going to dump all my NVIDIA and I'm going to dump all my 10 years. So probably, I don't know. I mean, I haven't actually looked into the 10-year and how it's been trading today. I have more important shit to do. I'm not going to sit over here and refresh stonks all day. Not worth the time. But yeah, probably. Does the Fed have to print to buy treasuries to fund the government, or just to lower 10-year yield rates? Yes, that's the main point. If what Trump wants is, we're not going to give the rest of the world a surplus when trading with us, then he has to find another buyer for U.S. debt and how to finance the $37 trillion of debt we already have. It's not an option. He can't say that, I've decided we're going to operate without a deficit and we're not going to have any more debt. You cannot decide that. Debt is borrowing from our future. There's already been $36 trillion of our future borrowed. You cannot just expunge that. You cannot just delete that. You cannot just decide you don't like that anymore. That's permanent loss. That loss has to be realized. Somebody has to lose. Somebody has to realize that loss. That's the reality of the situation. So Donald Trump and the U.S. government has to find a way to finance all of their debt. They have to find new buyers of treasuries. And if foreigners aren't allowed to buy it anymore, they're going to dump all their debt. They're going to dump all their stocks. And Trump's going to have to change the law so that U.S. banks can buy it. And he's going to have to get the Fed on his side. And when you heard Jerome Powell in the March FOMC meeting, that's exactly what he said. This motherfucker went from, I'm independent, I'm here to fight inflation, I don't care about Donald Trump, I don't like Donald Trump, I'm an independent central bank, I'm just going to fight inflation, fight inflation, fight inflation. All of a sudden, he was like, you know what? Even if we have inflation from tariffs, that's transitory. I'm going to slow down QT. QE is not such a bad idea, especially when focusing on treasuries. Why do you guys think that happened? He had no reason. He has not hit his inflation target. He had no reason to pivot. He had no reason to slow down QT. He had no reason to even flirt the concept of QE. Why did he do that? Because the United States needs someone else to buy their debt. They need another way to finance all this debt. Period. So is the Fed the one that's going to have to get stuck and foot with this bill? 1,000%. 1,000%. That's what I'm saying. If you want to fix the deficits, you have to print the money. You have to print the money. If you're telling all the foreigners, sell our stocks, sell our debt, screw you, you've been operating in a surplus and crushing the small American, fine. Then you have to print the money to make up whole for it. When do you expect the Fed to start QE, and what are the best ways to know since they don't always tell? I would say, I'm just guessing, the summer, maybe this fall, soon. They don't have a choice. The U.S., by the way, guys, the U.S. doesn't have a lot of time, right? Like, I mean, we've talked about it on this show. The U.S. Treasury has like $10 trillion to roll over in the next 12 months. They don't have time. They don't have a decade to moan and complain and pout. Like, they got to go. So I think the Fed has this summer, this fall. I think you got to listen. If you're a buyer of Bitcoin, avoid leverage, avoid a lifestyle you can't afford, live within your means, make more than you spend, humbly stack sats, be patient, allow yourself to benefit from what's inevitably coming. How's the only way you lose in this situation? The only way you lose is if you shake yourself out, if you lose too much leverage, if you got to distress and sell all your Bitcoin because you didn't think it could go down to 60K. Stop being an asshole. Reward your future self. Your future self is relying on the current you today to do the right thing. Take a breath, be smart, be patient. That's my message. It's absolutely coming. It has to come. I think this summer, this fall, probably. How to look out for it? There's a lot of the SLR is the biggest one. The SLR allows U.S. banks to buy treasuries, to buy U.S. debt in an infinite capacity because they don't have to post any collateral. I think the United States is going to use the U.S. banking system because Secretary Bessent said it on a podcast. Go to the All In podcast, and he positioned it. It was like, we need to deregulate the banks. Banks are overregulated, and it actually imposes on their ability to participate in the treasuries market. That's what he said. He positioned it like they're overregulated. They got too many rules. Let's remove those rules. Removing the rules is giving them infinite leverage to buy treasuries, basically replacing China and Russia with U.S. banks and the Fed. How do we know when the Fed prints? Guys, these financial authorities will tell you. That's the other funny thing about it is like if people just shut up and listen, like everyone's telling you what you need to know. What is Trump saying? I don't like deficits. I care about the middle class, lower class, middle America. We need to reindustrialize because it's a national security threat that we're relying on all these other countries to build and manufacture our lives. What if these countries want to go to war with us? What if these countries don't like us? All of a sudden, you don't get a phone, you don't get a laptop, you don't get food, you don't get gas, you don't get energy. It's a national security threat. We need to reindustrialize, focus on ourselves, stop operating in such a deficit, and wage financial war on the rest of the world. That's what he's saying right now. So for everyone that's like surprised by that, for every hedge fund bro that's like caught off guard, All you have to do is listen. Look at these big old ears. Just listen. They tell you these things. When when the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, gets on a podcast and says, we should deregulate the banks. We should increase their ability to use infinite amounts of leverage to buy infinite amount of treasuries. Listen, he's telling you he's trying to find a new buyer of treasuries. When the Federal Reserve all of a sudden, out of nowhere, says inflation is now transitory again, even if it's caused by tariffs, I don't care. I'm going to focus on easing monetary policy. Listen, just listen. They're telling you. So continue to listen. And I'll say it on this podcast every single Monday. I'll come on. I'll tell you the truth. They're telling you. So my expectation is banks will get this exemption. They'll be able to buy infinite amounts of treasuries. The Federal Reserve will slowly wind down QT, enact QE, and there'll be all sorts of programs. Like financial authorities will say, hey, America, we're launching the ABCDEFG program, and it's a bunch of dollar liquidity that's going to make your life better. And then Trump's going to tweet, look at the stock market. We're making America great again. Like, just listen. They'll tell you. Right now, Trump's saying, I'm not paying attention to the stock market. Everyone needs to take their medicine. I'm doing what I said I would do. I have a promise. Half my voters don't even own stocks. The most loud people on Twitter are the 10% of America that owns 90% of the stock market. What happens once the $9 trillion have been refinanced, in your opinion? I mean, the problem is that the U.S. debt and their interest payments is growing exponentially. Trump, listen to Trump. Never once has he campaigned and said, I want to operate in a surplus. He still wants to operate. I think Bessent's target is 3%, 3%, 3%. So they're going to refinance the debt only to have to refinance it some more. Like, the only way they can, like, you have to grow out of this. How can you get out of this? You have to, so debt to GDP. So that is how much have you borrowed from your future versus how much growth are you producing to pay it back. Okay, so you have to increase the growth part. How do they plan on increasing the growth part? The growth part, they plan on increasing by deregulation. So to get all the regulators out of the innovators' way. They want businesses to build. They want guys like me to start companies, go do cool Bitcoin stuff, grow, 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 grow. So get rules out of everyone's way, get institutions out of everyone's way, get regulators out of everyone's way. So increase the growth part, the GDP part, and they're going to devalue the debt by printing more money, weakening the dollar. So increase the growth, weaken the dollar, and then over time, you can grow your way out of it. That's the plan. But in the near term, in the immediate term, they got to print money. They got to print money. More currency units means higher Bitcoin price. What's going to happen to the $10 trillion debt that is maturing in 2025? How will that work? Bessent has been very clear. He wants a lower 10-year. He wants lower rates. These guys want cheaper rates to finance this stuff. I don't know how more simple I can make it. That's what they want. Is reverse repo drop any indication that money is about to be printed or QE on the horizon? Yeah, I mean, reverse repo being drained was like some form of stealth QE by Yellen, pretty much. So yeah, yes, I mean, reverse repo dropping means dollar liquid. I think that what people got wrong is they thought Trump would be immediately liquidity positive, like dollar liquidity, weaker dollar right away. That's his plan. And that's why this is good for Bitcoin. By the way, guys, it doesn't matter who got elected. At the end of the day, the only way to sustain all this mess is to print more dollars. When people with power and politicians have the choice, they're going to print capital. And that's why you got to own Bitcoin. The whole point is no one can print it. No one can debase it. No one can take it from you. You can produce value for the world and you can store it self-sovereignly on your own. The whole point of a distributed, decentralized, all this blah, blah, all this gookly gawk fancy word salad is that you can wake up and be valuable to the world and store that value yourself. You don't need to ask anyone's permission or live in the right country or have the right friends. That's the power of it. So at the end of the day, the end game is they have to print more money. Everyone's in debt. No one's making it whole for it. There's a bunch of mistakes people have made over the years. Someone has to lose. That's a reality. So yes, the reverse repo is one facility they've been using to make payments, find dollar liquidity, and when that's over, they're going to have to print. 100%. What effect do you think the treasury-backed stablecoins will have on the thesis you presented today? I mean, I think that the United States has an interest in stablecoins because stablecoins are finding a new buyer for U.S. debt. What is this like? What is Tether? Tether is basically onboarding an Argentine cab driver to U.S. debt. So the U.S. is looking for purchasers of their debt. Tether is 400 million users, 40 million they're adding every single week. And these are social media numbers that a financial services firm that's basically onboarding people to U.S. debt. That's insane. And so why does the U.S. want to support these companies? It's fairly obvious to me, because there's a natural buyer of U.S. debt. It's really a beautiful thing because then Tether takes all the proceeds and profits from buying the U.S. debt and buys Bitcoin. So that's why the U.S. is interested in stablecoins, because they need buyers of debt. Like, who wants to buy their debt? Because, by the way, like when you're an entity, let's take out the fact that it's the United States. You're an entity that's $37 trillion in debt. Your creditworthiness is not great. Who wants to own that? Nobody, clearly. How many bonds can the stablecoins absorb? Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. The whole point is like, hey, give us favorable regulations, support us, and we're going to do our best in onboarding the world to stablecoins and Bitcoin. That's the pitch. But if you get in our way and constantly harass us and sue us and shit, then you're not really helping us. Do you believe Jerome Powell will put individual stocks on the Fed balance sheet? Doubt it. Don't know why they would do that. Do you think Bitcoin will evolve into a decentralized nation? By the way, do I think Powell will put individual stocks on the Fed balance sheet? I think this listener is asking the question, well, if these foreign nation states are not taking their surplus in global trade and buying a bunch of U.S. stocks, who's going to buy U.S. stocks? I think the catch-22 is nobody. I think U.S. stocks go from trading at 20, 30, 40, 50 times revenues or multiple, and they get repriced. Sorry. I mean, people like China went from taking their trade surplus and buying U.S. treasuries to not wanting U.S. debt anymore because you're losing in real terms. They don't perform enough. And so they just took all their money and they just punted it into the stock market because owning Google was better than owning U.S. 10 years. So who's going to buy Google stock if China's not? Nobody. I think the stock market's just going to go down. I think this is the beginning of repricing the NASDAQ, and I think Bitcoin will decouple from that. I mean, stocks aren't. Let me tell you guys a story. I went in the sauna yesterday. I love the sauna, by the way. Highly recommend. Nice little sauna cold plunge sesh. So I'm part of this club in Chicago. I go to the sauna, and in the sauna, it's like a, bigger sauna, a bunch of club members in there. And all these guys are complaining about the stock market going down as if they're entitled to it going up. Like, let's be clear. The stock market is not a savings account. The stock market is not a hard asset. The stock market is not designed for you to create value for the world and store it there so that you can save it, exchange it later for the things you need in your life. The stock market is you making an investment in the future cash flows of a company. You making an investment in a founder, in a leadership team, in a product. And when I was sitting in the sauna, I was like, hey guys, can I humbly ask a question? Why do you feel so entitled to the stock only going up? When you make an investment, you take on the risk that it could work out or not work out. Like, you're taking on risk investing in a company. And they're like, no, I'm investing in the S&P 500 so it can go up. And it's like, okay, well, the world has to learn a bunch of very painful lessons. That's not how it works. Like, you're making an investment that could work out or could not work out. If you want to save your money, then you should buy something that's scarce, that's divisible, that you can self-sovereignly hold. And you should buy Bitcoin. You should not buy stocks. And so I think the stock market has to get demonetized. It has to get repriced. And like, the world has it completely wrong that it's a giant savings account that only goes up. if someone like China isn't going to buy Google anymore, who's going to buy Google? Nobody. Google's just not going to be worth 50 times earnings. Do you think the government will create 10-year Bitcoin bonds to buy Bitcoin for the strategic reserve? That would be awesome. Do I think? Probably not. Do I think they will? I'm not sure. Probably not. Do I think they should? Yes. Do you think Bitcoin will evolve into a decentralized nation with citizenship and global influence? Is it likely that we can build a decentralized entity on Bitcoin like a government? No, I don't think. And I don't think Bitcoin's going to be a country. I don't even know how to answer that question. I love the energy and the attitude of the question. Don't get me wrong. But I mean, there's still going to be land and people are going to want to go to beaches and there's going to be natural resources around the world. So Bitcoin doesn't have any of that. Okay, financial markets question. How much lower do you think Bitcoin can go? I mean, who knows? I don't love speculating on price predictions because the truth is nobody knows. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys I know what's going to happen. I'd be shocked. I mean, unless like something awful happens and we're going towards like austerity, I don't think Bitcoin's going to trade much below prior all-time highs. Prior all-time highs were 68, 69,000. So I think in a worst case scenario, we're low 70s, high 60s. I think practically the only way we see 50s, 40s is if like true austerity, true pain, like some threat of real practical World War III threat. In reality, I think we chop around. Maybe we wick down. We want to see distress. We want to see people puking up and selling and mayhem. That's probably the bottom. I don't know if we're fully there yet. To me, it feels like everyone's desperate for a little bit of relief. Like, oh, Trump's going to renegotiate. Oh man, did you see what this country said? And everyone's like desperate for this to turn around, only for it to just be like one last, like, no, really feel it. Trump's totally changing world economic order. Like World War II economic policy can't last. It's not sustainable. Like, I don't think people truly get it and they've felt the pain that needs to be felt there. So I don't know. I think April will probably be a tough month based on how it's going so far. Why has Bitcoin's price in dollars been so flat? Flat? What planet have you been living on? It's been volatile. I expect it to continue to be volatile for now. Eventually, I think it'll trade way high. I think $250,000 per Bitcoin this year is still entirely possible. Do you also expect MicroStrategy to go down, or is it resilient due to Bitcoin? I mean, MicroStrategy is worth at least as much Bitcoin as it has. Should MicroStrategy be trading at 100% premium? Should it be trading 2 times its Bitcoin value? I don't know. It's for the market to decide. If Satoshi never created Bitcoin, how would you have preserved your purchasing power? Gold or stocks or something else? I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts. If Satoshi never created Bitcoin, man, how thankful does that make you feel for the time you're living in right now, that you are alive during the early innings of Satoshi creating Bitcoin? Blessed. Hashtag blessed. I don't know, probably gold. Is there a way? Okay, now we're into some Strike related questions. So I'll blitz through these. Is there a way you can see your average buy price on Strike? No, not yet, but we are launching that super soon. We've heard the feedback. Lending. Is there a paper yet describing the details on your upcoming Bitcoin-backed loan program? If not, when can we expect it? We've been issuing loans since last week. We're rolling it out slowly. I'll probably publicly announce towards later this month. I've got probably the biggest announcement of my career coming out over the next few weeks. I got a really, really, really big one next week. And then we'll probably talk about the lending stuff following that. So I would say you can expect a lot more details in the coming weeks. And you can check your Strike app to see if you're one of the lucky customers to have gotten early access. We're rolling that out kind of in stealth right now. So we have customers with outstanding loans today. Will the Strike Bitcoin-backed loan be something that we can pay back in full at the end, or do we have to make monthly payments? Both. We have 2 versions. We have one that you can pay in back full at the end, and your interest actually is rolled into the principal, so you don't have to pay us until just one payment at the end. And we have another if you want to make monthly payments. So we offer both. Pretty cool. And last question, can you say whether Bitcoin-backed loans will be available early on in Mississippi and Tennessee? I can. I actually just don't know off the top of my head. I don't have kind of like the lending map in my brain at the moment. So it's something I'm happy to follow up on, or you can reach out to our team, and I'm sure customer support get that to you with no problem. Awesome. All right. I try to go quick. We're under an hour. I know everyone likes the tight episodes. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I read it all. I try and listen to your feedback. I get started right away, start on time, have one topic where I rant and then get to Q&A. The shows have been great. I really appreciate all your guys' support. This is more of a passion project for me, right? I run businesses I've created. I contribute to Bitcoin in other ways. This is more fun. This is, I don't make any money on this. I just really like expressing my ideas, trying to be useful, connecting with the internet, and getting your guys' feedback. So keep letting me know what you think, other ways I can improve. After these announcements I have upcoming over the next few weeks, I will start bringing guests on the show. I'm just really busy right now. You guys will understand why. So right now I'm just traveling and can only find time to do once a week shows myself. So I appreciate you guys. I'll see you next week at the least. And look out for some big announcements that I got coming up. Biggest of my career by far. So I really appreciate all the support, and I'm excited to share what I've been working on. Take care of yourself. Stay humble, stack sats, get some rest, smile.